The White Cat and the Mill. From It Stings, a collection of prose and poetry by Miles Beining. Coming to Amazon in Kindle and paperback on March 10th. Narrated by the author. But the darkness is not always dark, and the light is not always in the light. Physical manifestations both, limiting and empowering. Everyone always talks about the odds of getting hit by lightning, and the moment it strikes you, anything feels possible. That's how it was for Zach and Harry Almond when they were driving through a windy Eastern European night, and out of the blue, a flashing bolt of energy slammed into their car. Harry screeched the brakes, and the two instinctively fled the car, as if driven by some innate inner force of instinct. Moments later, the front of the car exploded in a ball of flame. The lightning must have hit the gas tank. Zach, thinking quickly, had grabbed the fire extinguisher he always kept whenever he drove as he exited the car, and he put the fire out once he judged it safe enough to approach. Zach and Harry sat panting and staring in shock for a few moments. The wind was blowing in the cool air, and the pine trees swayed heavily. They had seen nothing for miles, but now they had arrived right at the base of a hill, at the top of which sat a large, abandoned windmill. "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god," Zach cried. Harry put an arm around him. "What do we do? What do we do?" He was near hysterics. Harry broke his silence. "We should try our phones." For 10 minutes, the couple tried desperately to get a signal, but to no avail. The wind slithered against their skin constantly. The mill looked somehow menacing. It was simple enough, a standard issue in this part of the world, but there was something about its looming presence that made Harry wary, and when he saw Zach glance at it, he could see that his husband felt the same way. Its bricks seemed to curl with foreboding. The simple blade, sitting still in the night, spoke of malevolence and threat. To look upon the structure was strangely sickening, as if the building simply wasn't right, as if it had been built in exactly the wrong way at exactly the wrong time, and so it had been cursed. It exuded dark energy, and it made Harry feel like it was watching them, daring him to come within its depths. Harry walked back over to Zach. "The nearest town is like an hour away driving distance." They'd been going cross-country on a sort of European tour, making their way to Madrid for Zach's sister's wedding, which was to transpire in a week. Zach's small, slender figure sat behind the wheel most of the time he loved to drive, and Harry's hulking mass sat next to him in his thrift shop clothing, scratching his beard while looking at his phone. They decided at the last cafe along the way to push through the night to reach the next town. They'd seen all the wilderness they'd wanted the last few days and were itching to explore Bucharest. They hadn't planned on literally getting hit by lightning and being stranded on a country road. Harry sighed. "I think we're going to have to spend the night." Zach's eyes narrowed. "But where?" he demanded. "We haven't brought any camping equipment or sleeping gear or anything." Harry looked up at the dark mill looming over them. Zach's eyes widened. "No," he said cautiously. "Harry, you can't be serious. It's our only real option. We could sleep outside." But Harry could tell by the look on his face that Zach knew sleeping outside wasn't a viable alternative. The air was too cold, the weather too ferocious. The mill would provide a semblance of comfort. The mill was the only option. Still, Zach had to resist. "We could probably find a cabin or like a small home near us." "I doubt it," Harry said grimly. "I haven't seen a sign of human civilization for like an hour." Zach pursed his lips. "I guess you're right. I don't know why I was so resistant to the idea in the first place. It's just a stupid mill." But privately, Harry thought Zach was perfectly in his rights to protest against sleeping in the mill. There was something deeply unsettling about the building. But Zach was already frightened enough of it, so Harry didn't say a thing as his husband started getting things out of what remained of their car and ordered him to do the same. We'll need our toothbrushes and the blankets we've been keeping in here. We'll need water, and I'll grab some snacks out of the trunk too. Take whatever you think is necessary, but don't take a million things. Harry obliged. They carried an assortment of what have you up the hill, then reached a wooden door embedded into the rock of the mill. Do you think it's locked? Harry asked. Zach shook his head. This place looks abandoned as fuck. Even if it is locked, we can kick it open or something. A few minutes ago, Zach had been near panic, but he seemed to have worked through it. The headstrong and lively man Harry was used to was back. Of course, they were both still scared out of their minds, but at least they were thinking a little more clearly. Harry, whose hands were less full, tried the knob, and the door creaked open. It whined on its hinges with a mournful sound like a dying banshee, but it slid wide all the same. Beyond, a musty, rotted reek was emanating from the stone. It was very dark, and the large inner parts of the mill looked ominous and forbidding. The stairs, the wheels, the great beams guarding the way to the shadows of the ceiling, the large mechanisms sitting unused for what might have been centuries. For a moment, Harry considered changing his mind and finding a place to sleep outside, but it was getting late. Might as well just get this night over with. They stood looking around for a minute or so, both in silence. Then Zach went past Harry to start laying out their things on the wall to their left. Harry helped him. You hungry? Zach looked up. A little. I have some snacks in the bag. Harry produced a couple small sandwiches he'd gotten at the cafe. I bought these. Harry, you said you wouldn't. We've been spending an overload of cash as it is. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, but also, let's eat. Harry never spent a lot on anything, hence the thrift shop clothing, except on food. Good food was important. Zach looked at him sadly for a moment. Okay, yeah, fine, let's eat. They finished setting up and then sat down. They chewed their vegetable sandwiches thoughtfully. Harry? Yeah? Do you get a weird feeling from this place too? Harry was relieved in the confirmation that he wasn't alone in his nearly inexplicable fear of the mill. Yeah, the minute I saw it, I got a bad feeling in me. Maybe we shouldn't be here. We've been through this. Yeah, I guess. They ate some more, and then Harry spoke. Do you think people won't like us at the wedding? Zach looked up from his food. Honestly, some of them won't. They aren't going to love that I'm gay or that I have a husband. A few of them will even be uncomfortable because you're black. Harry grimaced. Probably more than a few, even though they would never admit it. Probably not even to themselves. Zach nodded grimly. Sure, but you've met my immediate family, and you know they love you. And my sister's friends are cool. Just stick with us and stay away from the old ladies giving you evil looks. Harry laughed. Avoiding scornful old ladies is what I do best. Harry decided that as long as they kept talking about normal things, they would be distracted enough to fall asleep without being too afraid. Lightning flashed, and they both winced. Zach finished his sandwich and started curling up in his blankets. Harry stayed sitting up. Your nuclear family is nice. Yeah, you've told me. I'm glad they weren't mad when I took your last name. Harry's former surname had been Briars, but he'd always longed to be rid of it, particularly when his parents had disowned him a week after he'd come out. Why the fuck were we just struck by lightning? Zach said suddenly. Harry looked at him. What do you mean? I don't know. Zach seemed to be struggling with something. It's just odd, isn't it? Like, what's the chance that we're gonna be hit by a bolt of lightning on a clear night? Yeah, I don't know. Zach seemed frustrated. The better question, I guess, is why do you think we were struck by lightning? Harry could tell where Zach wanted to go with this, and he was immediately repulsed. He decided not to acknowledge what he knew to be true. Premonitions of divine forces circled through Zach's mind. What do you mean? Harry asked innocently, but Zach seemed to see right through him. You know what I mean. The odds of us being hit by lightning on a clear night, they're too small. Maybe something wanted us to come here. Zach, you know that's ridiculous. No, I don't actually. Harry's husband was ever the spiritually leaning agnostic, and he held firmly that technically anything was possible. Harry liked things to be the way they appeared. His reality was something unshakable, a reality which was perhaps a little prosaic and disappointing, but substantial. It was not to be disturbed by demons and ghosts of other worlds. Bo thought himself to have a better approach to the scientific method. Harry, to be struck by lightning and be forced to stay in this weird, dark place, it just feels like some unknown force wanted us here. Zach, I know, Harry, that's impossible. There's no scientific evidence of supernatural forces at all. Zach scowled. But there's no scientific proof that the supernatural doesn't exist either. There's evidence, sure, but no proof. Harry agreed somewhat with that much, but still he protested. There's no official proof, but there's enough evidence against the paranormal that I can take a pretty well substantiated stance on the matter. I've heard that we've studied and discovered so little of our universe that it's impossible to fully prove or disprove these things, Zach argued. I believe that was used as an argument against the existence of God, answered Harry. At least humor me for a minute, Harry, sighed Zach. Fine, Harry agreed. He figured it would be a little cruel not to at this point. You feel a weird vibe coming from this place, too, don't you? Harry had to admit he did, and he nodded. His husband continued, and it's not just 'cause it's in a mill in the middle of the night. We saw other mills on our way here, and none of them had the same spooky vibe. Now, it could just be from shock, but everyone knows that there are certain places that can give off a super creepy feeling for no reason at all. Harry agreed with that, too. Let's just suppose that there's something off, maybe a little evil about this place. And let's suppose that a dark and unknown force wanted us here for some reason. Harry still didn't believe, but he continued to humor Zach. Okay, he said. I want to figure out what's wrong with this place, why it has such a weird vibe, and maybe why we're here. How do you expect to do that? Let's have a look around, Zach said simply. Zach, I mean, it's not like I'm going to sleep anyway. Maybe I'll find something, or maybe I won't, and whatever is going to happen will happen, supernatural or not. Come on, let's just both get some sleep, Harry said, exasperated. I'm going to have a look around whether you come with me or not. Zach was firm in his resolve. He got out of his sleeping spread and went to the winding staircase. Be careful, called Harry as Zach went up. He watched him go for a moment, and then something took hold over his heart. Some mysterious instinct, a deep-set feeling that he must go with Zach. The feeling defied logic, but he hurried out of bed to go after his husband. He joined him on the next landing, which was just stone and rails, nothing else. Curious? Zach smiled at him. I won't sleep anyway. Might as well have a look around, Harry mumbled. Zach laughed. All right, let's go. They went up the stairs. They were old and rusty, and Harry jumped a little as an image crossed his mind. The ancient metal giving out under their weight and collapsing, carrying them to a mangled and confused end. He shook the thought and continued up. The stairs were old, but they were still sturdy enough. They went to the top level, which was a sort of wraparound balcony overlooking the pit of machinery that was the mill's center. It was scattered about with old trunks and crates and a single writing desk a little to their left. Zach went to the desk and started to look through. Harry approached a wooden door an inch to the right of the stairs and opened it. It led to the outside balcony. The night was still windy. A few mysterious clouds floated overhead, but otherwise it was clear. The sky felt omniscient and full of dark secrets. Harry stood there a while, looking out. So lost in thought, his mind became nearly blank. A hypnotic contradiction. Why were they here? He really didn't want to believe Zach's theories and suppositions, but he couldn't help but ponder them. Horrifying thoughts to a sure and made-up mind. It made him feel a little like he might be going insane. And then a glimmer below. He looked down. About 6 feet from the foot of the tower was a bush, a shrub with its inner depths hidden in inky shadow, and within, a pair of eyes, green, lamp-like. And though he knew them to be an animal's, they were uncanny in their intelligence. A glint of humanity seemed to crackle inside. A shudder went down his spine. He was suddenly filled with a deep and rancid feeling of inexplicable dread. His mind was still a little empty. He tore his gaze away, almost running for the door. As he did, he fancied that for a moment the green eyes changed color. But that was impossible, and so he shook it off. Yet still, the scarlet eyes echoed in his mind. Zach was oblivious, and Harry decided it would be best for both of them to keep it that way. He was still at the desk, but a crate sat open next to him, and he was reading a sheet of paper. "Harry," he said, "come look at this." He went over and peered over his shoulder. Zach held what looked like some sort of blueprint to a building. Upon looking closer, Harry saw that it looked medieval, with plans for great walls, towers, and turrets. Everything was written in some European language. At the bottom it read, "Planuri de Expansione." There was also what looked like a coat of arms at the top right corner. Below this was what Harry guessed to be a name. Dynasty. "There's more," Zach said. He pulled out a thin notebook from the crate. He opened it, and pages upon pages of handwritten foreign words lay before their eyes. What is all this stuff? Harry wondered, trying to see if he could glean any meaning from the text. Then he noticed a great leather-bound book in the crate. The title was in loopy gold letters and said, Excessiori. The tome looked ancient and worn, and from it Harry couldn't help but feel a deep sense of dread. He wanted to pick it up and look through, but something in him was screaming at him not to. He stood frozen, not knowing what to do or why he felt so odd. Then Zach picked it up and flipped it open. It was filled with more foreign words, but this time they were accompanied by illustrations. Unnerving illustrations that were done in gray-black ink, shadowed and hideous. The book showed men and women with maleficent and dangerous looks in their eyes, dressed in robes, gowns, and capes. They bit the necks of other people who looked terrified out of their wits, yet strangely in ecstasy. The images were vivid and almost felt tangible. Blood, which was drawn in scarlet ink, poured down them, and other illustrations showed fanged mouths dripping with it. In still more drawings, the victims were force-fed blood from the wrists of the vampires. They were shown bowing before the demons with looks of blind reverence and unthinking obedience transfixed upon their faces. They were drinking from new victims at the command of the vampires, transforming into rats, flying with great leathery wings and filleting their masters' necks with shining white teeth. The smell of blood and lust seemed to pervade Harry's senses. "Oh my God," Zach said. "This is insane." "Must be some old book of folklore," Harry said. "Must be," Zach agreed, still appearing shaken as he set the book down. Something in the air felt really, really wrong. There was one more thing in the crate. A folded map. Zach took it out and unfolded the paper. It appeared to be of some great city, but not one that looked familiar. This, too, was in another tongue. The city looked to be surrounded by many mountains and woods, and it was enormous. So enormous that Harry didn't know how he couldn't recognize it. This place looked like it could rival New York or Los Angeles. There was a legend with what appeared to be the map's title written on it as well. Sangrest, Romania Monstru, Populati 6,000,000, 775.70144 kilometru. Below this were some other markings that Harry couldn't begin to understand. "What is this city?" Zach said. "I don't recognize it at all, do you?" Harry shook his head. "All this is so weird. Who put it here?" "I know, right? And why?" Zach agreed. "Some weird shit is going on, and I don't like it." He put everything back. They both looked at the other crates. Who knew what secret things were hidden in there? "Nope," they both said. Harry laughed. Those crates give me a bad feeling. Come on, let's get some sleep. Good idea. Zach appeared relieved. Gotta trust my gut. They went down the stairs. The crates watched them go with silent stares. They talked a while longer, both with eerie feelings in their spines. They dared not sleep, dared not turn off their lights. But soon they both drifted off, and they were beyond the wall of sleep. Harry awoke not too much later. He awoke afraid. He felt a presence. He knew at once that he and Zach were not alone. It took him a minute to remember he had eyes. It took him another minute to realize that he was surrounded by mist. What the? His tired brain thought dimly. The mist was everywhere, all obscuring. It sparkled a little and was tinged with green, but it was dark and everything looked like an old film. He was afraid, and yet not panicking. He became aware that the fear was not so bad, that he almost liked it. The mist thickened. He couldn't see Zach. He smelled something terrifying, yet somehow sublime. It registered as something familiar somewhere in his short-term memory. Lust, but not for sex. Those eyes from the bush. Why did they come to his mind now? Why did he imagine them staring at him from above, from the landing? Or was he imagining them? With an ecstatic dread, he realized that he was not. And then he saw before him a white cat. A white cat with glimmering eyes, and the mist began to seep into her. Her eyes, her intelligent eyes, her eyes which he could get lost in, her eyes which were the universe and more, sinking, descending. The smell of bloodlust. He sunk into the darkness as the eyes became scarlet and the cat opened her mouth. And then the pleasure, the passionate, painful, hungry pleasure upon him. And yet the horror, and yet the sublime. The laugh of a child ringing through the cold, windy night. The mill stood solemn, looking over the countryside with unending stolidity. They awoke the next morning with the overbearing sensation that they must leave. They didn't check the time. They did not eat. They did not look at the crates. They packed hurriedly and with hardly a word. They hustled out the door and walked toward town. Harry did not remember the mist, nor the pleasure, nor the cat. But a mile away, the urgency and anxiety that had gripped their hearts began to fade. And though they both felt languid and tired in the beating rays of the sun, they were happy to be away from the mysterious and strangely dreadful mill. Their minds had changed a little, leaning more into all their earthly desires, leaning into want. But they were happy. The wedding would be good. They would figure out what to do like they always did. Their lives would be happy. They had each other, and so they had the world. Harry and Zach exchanged a smile as they finally neared the town. It was the smile of lovers, true lovers, a smile that was worn only after much time and hard work. The most radiant of smiles, a smile of empathy and care. Their love made them happy, and it always would in the end, no matter what. They didn't notice the marks on their necks. Hey, thanks for checking that out. That was The White Cat and the Mill, a sample story from It Stings, a collection of prose and poetry, which is my short horror story and poetry collection that comes to Amazon on March 10th in Kindle and paperback. Make sure to subscribe and like if you want to see more stuff like this from me. You know, I plan on releasing one more sample story a few months from now, and I plan on, of course, making more videos about writing and artsy fartsy hipster stuff. What do you have to say, Pez Dispenser 11 from Stranger Things? Alright, thanks for that, Pez Dispenser 11 from Stranger Things. I'll see you in the next video. I see into your soul! Bye, guys.